Now, I have been given the unenviable task by the organizers of trying to sum up what has been happening today. Given that we've had something like a dozen presentations over 8 hours, I think that's going to be a challenge, and one that I will do my best to bring some sense of order to. Necessarily, these are scribbled thoughts, and when I go away and reflect on them later, you may find, as I may find, that I disagree with what I said before, but I'll give it a go. I had the good fortune of being the moderator at this event last year, and one of the things that came through was the regular theme of issues around connectivity. Now, I would say that if I was pressed on this, there's been a change this year away from connectivity to a much greater focus on enablement. Platforms enabling applications, platforms enabling data management, platforms enabling transmission and control. So 2015, I would say, is so far, and there is a lot to go yet in tomorrow's agenda when we zero in on some of the applications, a time of us understanding as an industry or as a series of industries that are interlinked how we enable the services that we want to bring to our customers and our customers' customers. If pressed, and I haven't been, but I'm going to give this a go anyway, I would guess that in 2016, what we will be needing to focus on is what we do with all the data that we're talking about. Because if IoT means anything, it means an understanding that there is a great deal of data that we're generating from these sensors, these devices and machines. And if we don't start to get a handle on that as an industry, we're going to drown in this data. It's going to become useless to us. At the moment, as data, it is useless. It only becomes of any use once it's translated into information, and that takes better analysis than I sense from my conversations with all of you around the event today. What applications have been particularly significant and referenced most today? Probably automotive. Qualcomm is a great example, talking to Hamid earlier. He was saying, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, but about 70–80% of their investments are automotive related at the moment. And correct me if I'm wrong, Hamid. I think there's a great deal more that can be done, as has just been alluded to by this panel. But also, we'd be fools to ignore what has already been very successful within M2M, which is areas such as fleet management and logistics across Europe, very big in the States, also big in Russia and increasingly in Asia. Industrial automation, again, we've had that referenced a number of times today with Industry 4.0. It was interesting to me, as I suspect it may have been to you. Thank you, Paul. As I suspect it may have been to you today. One of the first speakers was Dr. Alexander Lautz of Deutsche Telecom M2M. And he pointed out that Deutsche Telecom's focus within M2M is on multiple technologies and multiple partners. And the subtext of that, for me, is that this is a fixed line and cellular incumbent who is no longer talking just about fixed line and cellular connections. So I find it very interesting that they are throwing the net wide, as I note our British Telecom and others, Orange included, to look at alternative connectivity, alternative technologies, including low power wide area. We will have more on that tomorrow, I'm sure. But one of the things that came through from his message, in fact, he said it explicitly, is you can't do it all. So it's a lesson for all of us. I was personally impressed by the competence of a state secretary who is able to come to an industry event like this and talk on equal terms with others within the industry without making himself in any way a laughingstock. He was quite the reverse. I was impressed by him, and I don't know whether that's a unique opinion or it's shared around the room, because this is a difficult audience to work with given the amount of expertise in here. I know from my personal experience of talking to and working with some politicians in other countries, and they'd better remain nameless, but I know darn well they couldn't have done what he did. He spoke about 70% of SMEs, that's small and medium-sized enterprises in Germany, that say digitalization, not a phrase I'm particularly keen on, but digitalization is not top of their agenda. If that's true, and I've no reason to disbelieve Handelsblatt that he quoted, then that is of concern to Germany just as it is to every other country that is experiencing the same lack of urgency. I was intrigued to hear, as he mentioned, that the US platform approach to US adopts a platform approach to development of M2M and digitalization, whereas he sees Europe adopting a product approach. He talked about German standards, and that was the point at which he clearly upset Stefan Hoppe of OPC. I have some sympathy with that. I think I can see both sides. Stefan was hoping that we would have a broader focus as an industry and that we would look wider and keep our eyes on a global set of solutions. Because as Professor Sikora rightly showed later, the standards work is global and it is fast evolving. You only needed to look at the 3 generations of standards bodies that he pointed out to see the way in which the number of bodies is growing, but so is the remit in which they work. He pointed to there being over 200 ICT-related standards bodies. For those not familiar with that acronym or abbreviation, that's Information and Communications Technology. No apologies for explaining that. Clearly, there's a need to try and make developments future-proof. Henry Ford once famously said that if he'd been asked, or if he'd been asking his customers what it was they wanted before he came up with the Ford Model T, they would have said a faster horse. Now, that may or may not be the case, but the point is, an eloquent one on his part. He was reaching into the future, and it's only by us adopting a set of standards that we will be able to future-proof the products that we are now either bringing to market or envisaging for the future. So geniuses perhaps can predict what's next, but for the rest of us, standards are going to help. I was very taken by the energy of Stefan Hoppe, who spoke about the need for and the delivery of a unified architecture, the OPC UA. And of course, he's right. In industry, every department, every discipline needs to be able to talk to one another. That means packaging, in manufacturing, transport, materials handling, logistics. They've all got to be able to talk to one another. And yet, if you look at them in isolation, the skills that are needed in packaging are very different from the ones that are needed in transport. So they've got to have a common architecture. And clearly there is progress there to report. I, for one, wasn't aware of how much progress has already been made, but from what he says, there is evidently strong German government support already for what is described as the one and only architecture for the communication layer. I'm sure there are Americans who would have issue with that, but let that be a debate for another day. And I was also interested in the progress that was reported from Sierra Wireless on Mango, the open source hardware initiative. Then we came to Fraunhofer's Dr. Adel Al-Hezmi, who zeroed in on vertical industry interaction, and I've pointed a little bit to that already. Like Stefan Hopper, he sees the need for parking, traffic control, environmental protection, health, all to be able to integrate. But this time not simply in an architecture, but also he looks at data integration, and often that has to be in real time. The challenges there are obviously immense. So when I said to him rather provocatively that we had made great strides, he rightly put me in my place and said that he identifies continuing challenges in M2M stroke IoT, and they are in legacy software and hardware, coverage, installation, security, and cost. So there's no small amount of work still to be done. And then we came to Qualcomm's Hamid Reza Nazaman, who talked about R&D investment before we came to the panel. And again, he said connectivity is at the heart of our strategy. It would be strange from Qualcomm's background if it was anything else. But they are looking at it in short range, local area, and wide area remits. I'm struck that automotive dominates Qualcomm's investments, and I want to know when that's going to start to evolve into such a large enterprise being involved to a greater extent in other areas. I'm not blaming them. I think you go where the money is. My father taught me that many years ago. You follow the money if you're an investor, and why not? But they do need to watch out for other areas, and we will be talking about these tomorrow, namely wearables, namely advanced drones, and smart homes. Perhaps one should say smart buildings generally. So tomorrow, let's come back and have a further discussion about consumer applications and wearables, about automotive, utilities, smart cities, and Industry 4.0. But until then, we have a reception to look forward to, and I very much look forward to meeting each of you individually. My thanks for your attention, for your attendance, and I hope you'll join me in having a well-earned drink this evening and coming back refreshed and ready for a really entertaining day tomorrow. My thanks to you all.